A billion-dollar industry taking shape in Arizona.
We're really dedicated to making the best tasting beer as possible. We've dumped batches that don't meet our standards. We're constantly investing in lab equipment that'll help us make better beer.
Breweries in nearly every region of the state, supply and demand, or simply sharing a craft.
It's something that people are really gravitating towards. I mean, the flavors of the beers that are being produced today and everything are, I think, something that people are yearning.
This is Arizona Week. Hello, and thanks for joining us. I'm Lorraine Rivera. The number of breweries in Arizona is growing, so much so it's estimated to have a $1.2 billion economic impact on the state's economy, an industry that employs more than 20,000 people. Ed Sipos authored a book titled Brewing Arizona, and he says beer is a booming business. Ed, if you would tell us, is beer suddenly taking off in Arizona?
Yeah, it is. I think there's a lot of interest in beer, not just locally, but it's a national thing. Actually, international. There's a lot of craft breweries growing in a lot of other countries too, and it's something that people are really gravitating towards. I mean, the flavors of the beers that are being produced today and everything are, I think, something that people are yearning.
Is Arizona playing catch up now?
In a way it is. I mean, our laws were passed in 1987 and for us to be able to open up breweries in Arizona, and the first one did open up in '88. And there was a growth spurt, and then it slowed down in the late 90s and 2000s. It was kind of lull in the growth. And then in the past 10 years, there's been a real trend towards growing. A lot of the guys that started out as home brewers really fell in love with the industry and felt that they were doing something really good and they can make a difference and produce some really good beers. So you're seeing a lot of those guys come out and open up their own breweries, and there's some really great new beers and breweries for everybody to visit.
Do you think that some of the major beer companies, distributors, are starting to feel the pinch by these microbreweries that are popping up throughout the country?
Absolutely. You know, you look at Anheuser-Busch, their sales are coming down. It's for a lot of different reasons, but definitely craft beer is having a huge impact. Craft beer growth is growing, and most of the trend on the biggest breweries are coming down. And so it's definitely had a big impact.
You've been researching beer history in Arizona for some time now. We took a look at your book. What is it that really perked your interest about this whole idea?
You know, I started out many years ago. I was a collector. And it was even before I was able to drink a beer. I used to have my mom take me out, and I saw a can or something I liked, and I asked her to buy it. She bought it. We dumped it down the sink, and I had something to put on the shelf. But over the years, you know, I developed an interest. I found that, you know, there was a little bit of value to it, so it was kind of a little side thing, and it was fun. And I met friends that were doing it. I joined a local chapter, and I became president shortly after, and then editor, which I'm still editor of the A1 chapter of the Brewery Collectibles Club of America. And but that's what my interest came from. And also, I became of age at a time when craft beer in Arizona was taking off. So I was able to visit a lot of the early breweries and see what they were doing. I don't think back then I had a really full understanding of what was happening, but I really enjoyed it. And it was fun to see these new breweries come, and I started documenting it and just keeping track of what was happening. And eventually, it just became a book. And so it took a lot of years, but it was a lot of hard work, but it was a lot of fun too.
Take us back. Who were some of the original beer makers in Arizona?
Well, the first, I mean, we had Bandersnatch in Tempe. They were the first brew pub in Arizona. The first microbrewery, which doesn't have a restaurant attached, was Electric Dave's in Bisbee. Soon after, you had other breweries opening. Many of them are gone. Hops, you know, is one of them in Scottsdale. But also some of the guys that are still around that have been around a long time, Gentle Benz and Barrio Brewing Company. And that was in Tucson. Four Peaks opened up in '97, and they're still around. They're the biggest brewery today in Arizona. So they were able to really find a way to grow and become a huge part of the industry in Arizona. I mean, I think people's perception of what beer is has changed. Early on, you know, like for example, canned beer, for a long time it had a really poor perception. Today, a lot of the craft brewers are pushing cans because it's something that is actually a better vessel to be able to hold beer. It doesn't, you know, the light won't affect it. It's lighter, it's stored easily. You could take it to Arizona lakes. So it definitely has its advantages. You know, the whole craft beer scene came around with the slow food movement. And I think they grew together, you know, while people want to try different foods, different ingredients in foods and things like that. Same with beer. I mean, people wanted to try something different, something new, something that was a little more challenging compared to just a simple Pilsner or lager or something that doesn't really have a lot of flavor.
Do you feel like geographically every area right now is sort of stepping into this microcosm of business now? I mean, from Bisbee to Phoenix to Prescott to Tucson, who's not in beer in Arizona?
Well, I think right now wherever you have somebody that's interested in homebrewing will eventually, if their product is good or what they're doing is good and they have a passion and a will to make it a business, you can open up a brewery almost anywhere. I mean, obviously some areas are going to be better suitable for having a brewery. But for example, there's a little brewery in Verde Valley. And who would ever thought that that little town in Arizona would have a brewery? And there's other places. Kingman has a brewery, and there's a lot of towns that are opening up little brew pubs, nano breweries, and things like that. So these guys can share what they make, you know, with the public.
As you heard Ed say, the first brewery opened in Arizona back in 1988. Today, the Arizona Craft Brewers Guild counts 63 breweries, including brew pubs, in operation throughout the state. One of the newest is Granite Mountain Brewery in Prescott. Here's my interview with Michael Stanger, the head brewer.
We moved to Prescott around 2009, same time as the couple that became our business partner, who moved in just down the street. Happened to meet up. I was a home brewer. We'd enjoy food, my beer, and our business partner, Audra, had the idea of having underground tastings where I would brew 3 different styles, we'd have a theme, and I'd get up in front of everyone, tell them why I made it, give them a little history, and we'd have a good time, drink some beer, eat some food. The first one was we did in October 2010, and did 3 more each consecutive month. And the first one was 10 people, by the second one, 25, by the third one we had a waiting list. And so we continued to do that. The next year we had another series of about 6 tastings, and at that point we had such a nice local following that we decided to pursue it as a business. This beautiful spot opened up serendipitously, and we leased it out. We ran a Kickstarter campaign shooting for $15,000 and ended up raising $18,000. And yeah, I went from there.
How's business so far?
It's been great. Yeah, growing slowly and steadily.
What don't people know about Prescott and the breweries here?
It's growing. We were actually amazed that by the time we opened doors that we were only the second one. You know, Prescott Brewing Company blazed the trail. They've been going for 20 years now, which is amazing. But yeah, we managed to be number 2, and recently we got a 3rd one in Prescott Valley, and another one just opened doors in town as well. And yeah, there's 2 or 3 more that have their eye on that prize. So it's a beer-loving town, and it's growing.
Let's go back to you really liking beer as a hobby. I mean, you were young when you started this. What really perked your interest?
Well, one of my first career goals was actually to be a chef. I'd always been into food. One of the first, I cooked my first family meal when I was 12, and it was, you know, steak au poivre with green peppercorns and a brandy sauce. And so I've worked in restaurants since I was 15, so I understood flavors and balance, and once you learn how to make beer, you understand how critical that is and how much you have to play with within the, you know, just the 3 ingredients that go into it. And it's just so much fun.
What's the difference between a nano and a micro brewery? You're considered a nano brewery.
Correct, yeah. So it's based on the size of your system. I can make 3 barrels at a time, which is roughly 100 gallons. Whereas the smallest micro is usually making 7 gallons, but usually 20 to 40 barrels.
And you are the brewmaster. You're making fresh beer every week.
Correct. I prefer to call myself the head brewer because I don't have a traditional background. I don't have the education. I'm purely self-taught. So it's kind of like calling yourself a chef when you haven't been to the Cordon Bleu, you know.
If you would, in layman's terms, describe to me how you make beer.
So essentially the base of beer is malted barley. You take or any other cereal grain. You take a cereal grain, you malt it, you barely germinate it, kiln it, and you have a sugar base. You get some hot water, grind up that grain, mix it all together, and the enzymes take over and convert those starches into simpler sugars. You drain that liquid off the solid, you boil it, you add in any other flavor ingredients you want, mostly hops for bittering and flavor, but you can also throw in spices or whatever. Chill it down, and then the magic ingredient is yeast, and it gets in there and eats up all those sugars, creates alcohol, CO2, and most importantly, just a lot of flavor components.
What are you most excited about looking forward to the big picture of your business here?
Honestly, just keeping up with how we're doing. Just, you know, servicing Prescott as our local community, making good fresh beer, and maybe slowly growing, really slowly growing.
But as you said, this is a beer town.
Right. And so, yeah, for the most part, I'd like to stay in Prescott as much as possible. It's nice to throw a few kegs out to the outlying areas in order to bring people here to Prescott, not only to the tap room, but to the surrounding area as well.
You want to share your passion with people around you.
When we first did the Kickstarter, first growing, or first opening, people were like, oh, yeah, maybe you'll be the next Sierra Nevada. I was like, well, I don't really want to do that. I would like to stay pretty small and keep it kind of a mom and pop operation.
Michael, how many beers are available here at Granite Mountain?
We generally have 6 on tap. We have 3 flagships that we serve year round, and then 3 more that rotate out about every 6 weeks or so. I'll pour our 3 flagships. The first one is what we call our Bradshaw Blonde. The Bradshaw Mountains being the eastern border of Prescott. It's basically a nice, light, malt-forward beer, easy drinking. Then we have our Thumb Butte American Brown Ale. So as opposed to an English brown, which is generally a little bit lighter and sweeter, this one is bigger, bolder, and hoppier. Has a nice Northwest Coast hop character, a little nice and citrusy.
It's dark.
Yeah, darker than your normal brown for sure. And then if you want even darker, we have our Muddy Wash Milk Stout. So, you know, if you're familiar with a Guinness, which is a dry stout, this, on the other hand, is known as a sweet stout. It's brewed with lactose. It's milk sugar, which is completely non-fermentable. So by the time it's done, that's all still in the beer. So it provides a nice background residual sweetness that rounds out the bitterness of the hops and the bitterness of the roasted grains that go into it.
What's the alcohol content in the 3 that we have here?
So the blonde is about 5.5, and these 2 are about 6.5.
Okay. And your best seller?
Generally the blonde. For the people that are bigger beer drinkers, the brown is the favorite. And that was actually a recipe that won a gold medal at Arizona Society of Homebrewers Oktoberfest competition back when I was a home brewer.
The Tucson region is experiencing vast growth when it comes to breweries. The Dragoon Brewing Company is one of the youngest and fastest growing. Here's an inside look at how some beer-loving buddies took home brewing to a new level.
Bruce Green, our owner, started homebrewing back in the 90s and got his son Eric into it. Eric decided to take it kind of a step further, went and got formal education at a brewing school. Commercial brewing is very different from doing it at home. So he got appropriate training, interned at Harpoon in Boston, Mass Bay Brewing. Very big brewery, probably 10 times, 100 times as big. I mean, they're huge. And then came back, worked for Nimbus for a little bit, kind of made some circuits in the beer industry. And then we met at the Homebrew Club in Tucson and kind of kicked it off. And I wanted to work in beer. Bruce wanted to own a brewery. Eric wanted to be a head brewer someplace. It all kind of fell together and we decided we were going to open it up. We all get along really well, kind of have the same ideals as far as like what the company should be. And yeah, we started looking for a place in 2011, I think. It's been a while. My wife actually came up with the name. We're very bad at naming things as a company. That's one of our weaknesses. We were tossing around names for probably 2 months, and she heard something about the Dragoon Mountains on NPR, actually. We wanted something regional, something that people could identify with in the Southwest, but not something cheesy. We didn't want to be Cactus Brewing Company or something like that. So Dragoon, she brought it up, and all of us kind of looked at each other and said, well, that works. We make 2 year-round beers, Dragoon IPA and Stronghold Session Ale. Dragoon IPA wanted, our IPA is very simple, wanted to keep it as simple as possible, so we let the name reflect that, just Dragoon IPA. And then Stronghold Session Ale, we wanted to name it regionally again, so Cochise Stronghold Session Ale. We kicked around Stronghold IPA, but Stronghold Session Ale kind of made more sense. Saison Blue is one of our seasonals. It's a blue, it's not blue in color, but it's made with blue ingredients, blue corn and blue agave. So it's kind of an easy name there.
There's a little bit of art and science, and they kind of come together and make beer. Right now you can see the mash in there. It's a mixture of malted barley, some chocolate malt, crystal malt, and some flaked oats, which you can see floating around in there. Basically what's happening is we've converted all of all the starch that's in the grain into just simpler sugars using enzymes that are naturally present in the barley. We recirculated that mash to clarify it, and now Wes is running that wort into the kettle. You can see we've got about 4.5 barrels in there right now. That's about 120 gallons or so, 130. So this process will take about an hour and 20 minutes or so. While the liquid is running from the grain into the kettle, he's also spraying hot water on top to help rinse those sugars out. And then once this kettle is full, we'll fill it to about 18 and a half barrels, which is approximately 500 gallons. We'll add hops and boil it for about 75 minutes. Throughout this process, we monitor the density of the wort, the sugar concentration, and the pH, just to make sure that everything is consistent and within normal parameters. If anything changes, we can adjust and correct the beer now. So after we spend this 12-hour process here today, it'll sit in these fermenters for about 10 days or so, and we'll filter it, carbonate it, and package it. Here I've got a sample of 2-row base malt. This makes up most of the fermentable sugar in all of our beers. We use RAR 2-row, which is a Canadian barley. It's malted in Canada, and it's shipped to us from their malting facility in Alberta. It's a nice, clean, simple grain that just gives a little bit of toastiness and a lot of fermentable sugar. And then we use other specialty grains like this chocolate malt, which makes up a good portion of the session ale that we're using, or that we're brewing today. So there are about 100 or so different varieties of malted barley that we can use, and they've just been treated different ways to create different flavors that we can put into the beer. So in this particular brew, we've got 6 different types of grain that go into it in different proportions. And then we've also got a little sample of hops, which are, if you smell it, they're very aromatic. Mm-hmm. They impart, like a really floral, sometimes earthy aroma. And they also give beer quite a bit of bitterness, depending on how much you use. We like hops here, so we tend to add a little more hop to most of our beers than other brewers might. So all of our beers, if you come taste something in the tap room, you'll definitely taste hops in it. Without any bitterness, the beer would be just sweet and cola-like. So you need something to kind of give counterpoint to that. Even if there's just a little bit of bitterness to provide a little bit of interest, you have to have some. We brewed this batch of IPA yesterday, and the yeast is really active. It's busy taking those simple sugars that we made in the brew house, turning them into alcohol and CO2. And what you see here is CO2 coming out of the top of the tank. There's a little bit of foam mixed in because it's really, really active. And so you'll see it'll push a big stream of foam out, and then it'll push a big plug of CO2 out right after it. The beer's not carbonating, but there's a lot of CO2 being generated. We've got wine barrels, tequila barrels, rye barrels, whiskey barrels, brandy barrels. We basically age all different types of beer in different types of barrels. We try and match the spirit or wine that was previously aged in the barrel with the type of beer that we want to put in. For example, we have some freshly filled tequila barrels. We put Saison Blue, which is one of our seasonal beers. It's brewed with blue corn and blue agave nectar, which the flavors of those should match up pretty well with the tequila.
We're just over 2 years old, celebrated our 2nd anniversary on April 17th. Business is great, community's been awesome, super receptive. We've gotten into accounts that we didn't think we would get in for 10 years. People have love the beer, love what we're about. It's been awesome. Well, we're gonna expand, hopefully soon. We've got the lease next door for approximately 12,000 square feet. Gonna basically poke some holes in the wall, expand the tap room, expand the production. Should be able to crank out around 3,000 to 4,000 barrels a year in this building. And then after that, like 10-year plan, probably open a new facility with different location, all new equipment.
We're tiny. We make last year we made 1,600 barrels of beer, which is about 3,200 kegs. I can't even fathom the number of kegs that went out of a single Budweiser facility. But we're a tiny share of the market. So we sell approximately 1,000 gallons of IPA in a week, and that's one of our brands. There's 2,700 breweries in the U.S., and we're probably not in the top 1,000 as far as production levels go. Maybe, but we make beer that we're proud of.
Well, the beer industry has gone through a big revolution in the last 20 years. The resurgence of beer in general, from a mass market product, a commodity, to a craft product, something that's artisanal and people are spending time making, and then the consumers are spending money on, as opposed to a commodity that's bottom line dollars and cents. Beer in general is down almost 2% in the national market, but the craft segment is up 17%. These are independent, small breweries that are really pushing the envelope as far as beer is concerned. In Tucson specifically, we had 3 breweries for a very long time, and it's a 1 million+ person metropolitan area. There's room for 10 more. So, it was inevitable that Tucson was going to grow as far as beer is concerned, and we're just happy to be a part of it. Our secret is kind of 3-pronged, I would say. One, we make the beer, we sell the beer, we deliver the beer, we pick up the kegs, we clean the lines at draft accounts. We do all of that ourselves. 2, we're local. We're all from Tucson. Everybody knows who we are. Because we're working in a brewery that, I can go in and fill in brewing, and then I can go the next day and sell the beer. That really helps because it really resonates with people. And then the third thing is we're really dedicated to making the best tasting beer as possible. We've dumped batches that don't meet our standards. We're constantly investing in lab equipment that'll help us make better beer. We're actually developing a sensory panel of a bunch of employees that we taste beer every week and write down what's wrong, what's right. We're really dedicated to quality. That's like our biggest thing, I think.
We brew relatively small quantities and turn it over pretty rapidly, so it's always pretty fresh. When we want to, we can age things, and when we release them, they're ready to go, and people don't have to hold on to a bottle and wait for it to get good. They can drink it right now, and it's ready to go. We pay a lot of attention at every step of the way, just to make sure that our beer tastes the way we want it to taste. We don't put out beer that we don't want to drink.
Much different news now in The Buzz with my colleague here at Arizona Public Media, Christopher Conover. Christopher, a lot to get to. A big budget passed this week.
Big budget passed. The federal budget passed. It's $1 trillion, a little bit more, but when you're dealing with $1 trillion for the average person, that's enough. It's $1 trillion budget, funds all of federal government through the end of the fiscal year, which is the end of September, except for the Department of Homeland Security, which is Border Patrol and things like that. That's only funded through February at this point.
So what does that mean? Come early next year, will we see the Congress go back in to figure out what to do with those dollars?
That's exactly right. And they did that very purposely. Republicans obviously do not like President Obama's executive actions on immigration. They want to do something about that, but they haven't had the time to really figure out what they want to do and how they want to do it effectively. So they're only funding Border Patrol and all the border-related things through February. That gives them, as a new Congress with more Republican members, time in January to figure out what they're going to try to do before the budget runs out, instead of funding all the way through the end of the fiscal year.
And if you would explain why Customs and Border Protection falls under a different umbrella when it comes to budget talks.
They fall under the Department of Homeland Security, so that's what got the shorter amount of funding. Just because the Customs and Border Protection was only funded through February, though, doesn't mean that all immigration things didn't get funded for the whole year. For example, there were dollars in the education budget to deal with children that are in different school districts. There were dollars in the Health and Human Services budget to deal with if there's another influx of unaccompanied kids like we saw last summer. Things like that are covered in other areas of the budget.
Okay, and also big news this week here in Arizona, Governor Brewer and the licenses for Dreamers.
The licenses for those under DACA, the Deferred Action for Childhood Arrivals. Governor Brewer doesn't want the state to issue them licenses. State law says you have to prove you're in the U.S. legally to get a driver's license in Arizona. She says DACA does not do that. The Ninth Circuit Court of Appeals said, yes, it does. So she is going to appeal to the U.S. Supreme Court, but she has asked the Supreme Court to stay the Ninth Circuit's decision while she prepares the appeal. If they don't stay it, that ruling goes into effect the middle of next week. Those kids could start applying for licenses.
Interesting. And then, of course, her term is up next month, so lots to look forward to.
Doug Ducey to continue or to not continue.
All right, Christopher Conover, thank you for your analysis. That's our program. Be sure to join us next week as we take a look back at this year's big stories. For all of us here at Arizona Public Media, I'm Lorraine Rivera. Thanks for joining us.